Okay. Um, Hi again, everyone. Thank you all for coming here. My name is Sharlyn. I'm from Auckland Hospital. I'm a clinical specialty nurse for hematology research. So as I've said, we've got a huge team in Auckland, but mainly there's two hematology research nurses looking after the hematology trials. But we work closely with the hematologists at Auckland Hospital. And then we've also got study coordinators, which does the hard work at the background. So all those bookings for the MRI, CT scans, and all those tests to make sure that it gets done. And my role as a research nurse, I do see the patients. Apart from doing blood tests and giving medications, I'm also the first point of contact for people who are on the trial. So if they've got any questions, they can directly contact me and my colleague. And then we also make sure that the medication's given in time and within the right time frame, because with clinical trials, we're quite strict with the timing. We've got this called window period. So that's me and my team. So Tim invited me to give a talk about clinical trials overview. So I'm going to talk about what is a clinical trials, give a little bit of idea, gist of what we actually do in New Zealand and clinical trials in general as well. So for this talk, I'm aiming to discuss what clinical trial is. So we're going to talk about the phases in clinical trials, which you will often hear: phase 1, phase 2, phase 3, phase 4. We'll discuss what that is. Types of trials, we've got quite different types. And then we're going to talk about informed consent, which is the most important part of any clinical trial. So that's why I've included that in this talk. And then next, we're going to talk about the clinical research study journey, which is like a sort of summary, or if you've got any questions, feel free to ask during the talk whenever. But like the last slide would be what an actual clinical research would be, not just in Auckland, but like in everywhere. So now, clinical trial or clinical study, what is it? It is any investigation in human subjects intended to discover or verify the clinical, pharmacological, and or other pharmacodynamic effects of an investigational product, in order to identify any adverse reactions to an investigational product, in order to study absorption, distribution, metabolism, and excretion of an investigational product with the object of ascertaining its safety and efficacy. The terms clinical trial and clinical study are synonymous. So if I use clinical trial or study, they're synonymous. So I've got that definition from ICH GCP. So all research staff would undergo a good clinical practice. So GCP, good clinical practice. So it is I think a half-day lecture, but before that you need to do an online theory or a quiz. It just guides everyone what to do with the consent, and how to keep the information that they have, and how to, what to do with the information and what to do with the patient. So everything that we do, this is our foundation, the good clinical practice. So starting from the nurses, from the doctors, pharmacists, laboratory people, everyone should have this good clinical practice training. It's not like a license, but we do have a certificate that we use, and we renew it. I think it's every 2 years. We're going to make sure that it's up to date, and if they do have any updates, then we make sure that we're on it. So yeah, clinical trial or clinical study, important human subjects. And then usually we do a drug, and our aim is to identify the safety of the drug. That's why we call it like the clinical trial or a study, because we study how the drug would affect you, if it's better than the current standard of care treatment, or obviously the quality of life as well, if it would make it easier for the participant or the patient involved, or it's going to make it worse. So that is the major definition of the clinical trial or clinical study. Like human subjects involved, using a new investigational product. So next is the types of study. So of course, a clinical trial is super expensive, because they need all the resources, all the laboratories. So this types of study is with regards to our sponsor or to our funding. So we divide it either industry study or collaborative study. So for the industry study, these are the big studies like Beijing, Pfizer, Merck. So they are sponsored by them. These studies are organized by a pharmaceutical company who financially is investing in a new drug or therapeutic area, who or may not have a contract research organization doing the monitoring. So some of the studies, the industry studies, if you happen to partake in one, you'll notice that they'll give petrol vouchers. It's to reimburse for your time going there. They pay for the accommodation, so they pretty much pay for every visit, because it's a big company investing in like a drug. The other one is called a collaborative study. These are also called a non-commercial trial, investigator-led trial, or an academic trial. This study is run by a university, hospital, or an academic group such as ALLG or TROG, who all collaborate together to run the trial. So this one is, in terms of the benefits, I mean, you get both the new medication. It's just that they don't have the funds to give you like petrol voucher. You still get the same benefit from it, but it's more, their budget is limited. So you still get the drug, but in terms of the other packs that you get, they don't have much to offer in that. So we do run both the industry and collaborative in Auckland. We do have a lot of trials under those studies. Any questions so far? Okay, so I'll carry on. Next is another type of study. It's a type of study that divided it before according to the funding. Next is the type of study under randomization. So we've got to blinded or open label. You might hear this as well. Oh, this is an open label study, or this is a blinded study. So in a blinded study, it's a trial in which participants, the subject or the investigator, or both, are unaware as to whether they are in the experimental or control arm of the study. So you might be getting a placebo, or you might be not. But for it to run, we have to treat you. So we're not just enrolling you in the study and give you a placebo and not receive treatment. So you're getting the treatment, but you are getting like a new experimental drug to top up the treatment to see if it works. And that experimental drug, we don't know if it's a dummy or not. But either way, it's unethical to get you into a trial and just get a sugar pill. Yeah. Yeah.
Does that mean you're not getting anything?
Yeah. So no, that's a bit unethical. Like this. Yeah.
Okay.
So you are getting the treatment, but the experimental drug that they're using, we don't know. It's just to prevent bias. This happens especially in the later trials like phase 3, phase 4, because like if we were to choose, we'd give them all the new drug. But to prevent bias, for the companies as well to know which one does it actually work. So that's why they do the later phases. They do a blinded study. The other one is open label, a trial where all the participants are aware of their received treatment. So usually phase 1 or phase 2, sometimes phase 3. So you know exactly what you're getting, especially for the newer drugs, for the newer phases, it's almost always open label. So once they've established that everything's okay, then if they go to the later phases, then they go blinded. But of course, in any other trial, safety is always our priority. So that's why if you do get into a trial, you notice you get lots of blood tests, lots of scans, because we want to make sure that everything is in the right place. And of course, sorry, with the blinded, in case there's emergencies, we can always request to unblind. In case like you're massively bleeding or some tragic response which we don't know, we can always request from the sponsor to know. We call it unblind to find out if are they getting the placebo, are they getting not, is it causing the tragedy, or but a lot of the times it doesn't happen often, but if it does happen, we can always request to unblind. So trial phases. So these are the phases that I was talking to you about earlier. We got phase 1, phase 2, phase 3, and phase 4. Sometimes other trials would say phase 0, the preclinical ones. So those are the ones that they test in the laboratory, test in the mice, find out if it's actually working. And then after that, they go into the phase 1. Phase 1 is first in human trial. So it's the first time that they've given it to like yours. So mainly for phase 1, they check if so at all phases, safety is always there. But for phase 1, they check what dose is safer. So sometimes you'll hear dose escalation for phase 1, because they start off with the lowest dose, and then that's why they only have at least 20 to 80 subjects, because they need to check the blood tests and all those biopsies that everything is safe for that lower dose. So once they get enough data, then they increase the dose and then add more people in it. So that it takes a while, because they need to continually check that it's safe for that dose. And then after phase 1, they go phase 2. So not every trial goes to phase 2, because it depends on what the safety data is for phase 1. So phase 2 is testing that the dose that they've established in phase 1 is okay, is safe. They know it's safe, but they want to test it more. So they don't escalate the doses anymore like they did in phase 1. They're gonna use that dose and see if it's actually safe, if what their reported side effects are the same, and if there are new side effects. So now that they know that it's safe from phase 1, they're gonna increase the number of people, because phase 1, 20 to 80 subjects. Phase 2, actually this is safe. Let's recruit more people to have more data. And then, as I said, the dose is taken from the phase 1 trial. So randomization, it's usually around open label, because they still need to know that some people do a bit blinded, but probably closer to phase 3 already. And then phase 3, this is the phase where you compare it to the standard of treatment now. So they know that it's safe from phase 2 and phase 1. For phase 3, okay, let's compare it to the standard of care drug that they use for the patient, because they know that it's which one's better. This is where your blinding comes in. They want to know that if you add this new medication to the standard of care, is it actually better, or do we keep the standard of care as it is? So that's why they blind it. And then that is the final stage in doing further assessments. The next is the phase 4. That is a long-term follow-up. Usually the drug is already registered in FDA. It's already out in the market. It's already super expensive once they get out in the market. So the GPs, other specialists will just follow it. So what we usually do in clinical trials, is we do phase 1, phase 2, and phase 3. Because for a trial to finish, it takes around 10-15 years for that. Yeah, there's a lot of people. And even once you're done with the trial, like for the chemo, like say you get 6 cycles of chemo, so you're done with the chemo, but because you're still part of a trial, we go into the safety follow-up, or the follow-up period. So might be calling you every 6 months just to check how you're doing. Sometimes we do ask for labs. So some people would actually stay in the tower for like 5, 10, 15 years. So just for follow-up. Yeah, just to make sure, especially phase 1 trials, because it's the first one in human. So they need to know, are the people in this trial still alive after 5 years? How many have progressed? How many are in remission? So that's why it takes a really, really long. And then sometimes, especially other types of cancers are rare. So then they don't have enough people, they don't have enough data. So that's why it's even longer. So that's why it takes 10 to 15 years for it to be done. And even then they still carry on with the phase 4, which is the follow-up. So that's why the new drugs, they become super expensive when they're out in the market because of all this time and money invested in for so long.
Right.
So
Is there a criteria for selecting which blood cancers will be used in the trial?
yes. Yes, so each trial, they have a specific blood cancer, like for instance multiple myeloma, and then they have certain, we call it eligibility criteria, inclusion criteria. So they're very strict as to what they want. Say you're only allowed to have 1 line of chemotherapy prior to before you're allowed to join the trial, and you have to have like a measurable like free light chains or serum M protein. So they're very strict. So each type of each type of trial have got a really strict inclusion criteria. So that's why we can't enroll everyone because they're very strict with what they want. And of course they want the data as well. So that's why they want a particular type of cancer. So yeah, different trials, different protocol. We call it protocol, the trials, the one that's written, different eligibility. So
Did I have burner about say full body scan?
yes.
All the blood tests.
Yeah.
Yes.
And ultrasound.
Yeah.
Yes.
All that to see whether I was
Eligible.
Yeah. And also that's the benefit of clinical trial. You get all these
Get all
scans
that
for
done.
free. Yeah, you get all these scans free. You get seen more by the doctors. Yeah, and you have a point of contact as well, because it is a trial. Of course there's always risk, but risk and benefit, like everything always has. But with clinical trials you get seen more because they want to examine more. So, and then I think some trials as well would allow you to have more scans, which is good. Yeah, because sometimes it's hard to get those scans.
Yes.
So there it's got its perks.
Yeah.
Okay, so next one, informed consent. I'll focus on informed consent because clinical trials, we want to make sure that you are aware of what you're signing into. Everything that you do, you must agree. And the good thing with clinical trials is, if you want to stop the trial, you can stop at any point. And you're not going to get lesser treatment just because you stopped with the trial. You're going to get discharged. If one of my patients decided, oh, actually, I've had enough of the visits. I'm sick of the nurse calling me every 3 months, checking if I'm still alive. Some people get tired of that. Yeah.
What's the alternative?
So then you'd be like, oh, okay, that's fine. You can stop at any point. And then we give you back to the hematologist to follow up. And if you do require chemo, you're not going to be deprived just because you stop on the trial. You're going to get the same amount of care as you did when you were in the trial. So, and so we call it a PIC, a patient informed consent. So once you sign into the trial for a study, a protocol, they make a patient informed consent. It's got everything there. So that's the main, for instance, say Pfizer creates a trial and then they create a generic patient informed consent. And so then once it comes to New Zealand is going to make informed consent, which would, cater to everyone in New Zealand. And then once it passes that, because we're like different sites, once in our site, we have a localized patient informed consent. It's mostly something to do with like the contact numbers to to the Maori support and all that, because it's different for every site, and our SOPs and protocols as well for every site are different. So that's why they changed the informed consent like very thoroughly to cater to the site's specifications. So informed consent, it is essential, and it should be done prior to any study procedures. So if you partake in a clinical trial, say, bone marrow biopsy, I've done this so many times, but if you're going to join a clinical trial, we can't do a bone marrow biopsy unless you've signed the consent, especially if it's part. So anything trial related, we need to have an informed consent. So with that particular, with informed consent, we don't want to, coerce anyone. Even if you say, it's just a blood test, it's just, we don't do that. Like, we want to make sure that you are aware of what you're signing up for and what you're doing. And informed consent is usually written and oral. So if, say your hematologist is going to talk to you about the trial orally, and then the next visit, you get a written one. Normally, we send an informed consent at least 24 hours prior, just for you to read. And then next, it should be in your native language, say lay language. If you do need an interpreter, we need to have an interpreter. If you speak Mandarin, informed consent should be translated into Mandarin. So we've got that covered as well. So we're very particular with informed consent. And next is, it should be independent and free of coercion or influence. So it should be at your own will. Like, hey, you're gonna get like, I don't know, $5,000 if you join this trial. So, we don't do that. we don't give out anything. And then you should be given enough time after a sufficient time of review. So in our area, we give at least 24 hours, or at least overnight rather, for you to talk to family if you should be joining this clinical trial, and think, because everything is written there, like the schedule and pros and cons. And then next is, it should be approved by ethics. Of course, everything we do has, especially because it's a clinical trial, ethics has to approve that. And that's why the pick goes from generic to New Zealand ethics, and then to the Auckland Ethics Committee. And then, as I said, voluntary withdrawal from the study at any stage. Even after cycle 1, you'll be like, oh yeah, I'm done. Yeah, it should be, you can do it at any point. The next, for your informed consent, there's actually usually 3 pages, three types that we give. So you got the mandatory one, the main one, which tells you all about the trial. And then you've got 2 optionals. So optionals are usually for the trial center to use, like say, hey, are you happy for us to collect extra blood tests? Or it's just for study purposes, just for you to help out, to give them a sample, but you don't have to sign, it's just completely optional. Or when they do a bone marrow biopsy, shall we get an extra sample? But everything will be discussed, and of course you can always say no to the optional and just stick with the main one. So we're quite big on the informed consent. So what is inside the informed consent? So it's several pages. When you join a trial, don't be overwhelmed by like 20-25 pages of informed consent. That's why we always say we give overnight, because it's very thick. It's not just a one page informed consent. It's several pages. And you're free to talk it over to your family. And if you do have questions, we always recommend highlight it, bring it back, because we're not going to rush you into joining a trial. Like, here's informed consent. We're starting treatment tomorrow. No. We want to make sure you have enough time to read and ask questions. And, if you need a second opinion, of course, we always want you to do whatever's best. So what's inside an informed consent? So it will say the study purpose, the design, and the drug information. The design, if it's blinded or it's randomized, so it will tell you what it is, what phase it is, and why are they doing that? Because they usually say something like an endpoint, why they want to, what they want to achieve out of that. Next, safety information, known risk and alternative treatment pathways. With anything, there's always a risk. Even Panadol will always have, like, it's got an adverse event. So the known ones, they list it down, and then write it down what to expect, say diarrhea or hair loss. So they're gonna list it down. And for instance, some medications will cause peripheral neuropathy, and they will also list down what to do in case you have that, like the dose modifications. So, and then the next one is the samples, the blood or tissue, the pathways. Normally we do our local lab, and then some of the bloods or tissues go to like Singapore or Australia. It's called a central lab, where the sponsor has got that lab to read all the results so that it would be the same. And then compensation policies, including injury compensation and other related cost coverage, like travel costs or petrol vouchers, they will say it there as well. And then you'll have your contact information, like HDEC, Maori RRC, and clinical team contacts. We'll have our number there and who the doctor is. And then personal data disclosure considerations, including inspections by third parties and data retention timelines. They will tell you who is allowed to look at your data. When you get signed into a clinical trial, we will not use your full name. So your full name will not go into the center. We usually assign random numbers and letters and numbers to your name and the date of birth and the gender. So that's all they need to know. They wouldn't know who the patient is. They will know your condition, but apart from that, it's kept entirely confidential. And then whether the study results are to be shared with the patients, like with other patients. So that's what the core information, what's written on your informed consent, at least those. Next is the procedure of the informed consent. As I said, we don't just give out informed consent. Yes, start the trial tomorrow. We can't do that. First is usually your hematologist will talk to you about your condition, and then we'll tell you like, oh, here are the options. You either get the standard of care treatment, or like say for CLL, you give chemo or you go into a clinical trial. And then they will talk to you about what the clinical trial is. That's not a consent visit. They will just give you options and overview of what clinical trial is available. So we don't do blood tests there. We don't do anything. We don't. You might not even see me on the initial discussion, because they will just talk about in general what a clinical trial is, or your clinical trial. And then you'll be provided a copy of the consent. Sometimes we give out the copy of the consent and then you go see your doctor, and then they'll talk about it. And then after that, then you go your consent visit. That is the time where you sign the consent in front of the doctor, and we do everything like blood test. The visit might be combined with some of the screening procedures. So we might decide to do ECG and bone marrow biopsy all in the same day, but the consent must always come first. And then once you've signed the consent, we usually give you a photocopy of the consent. And every time there are changes, we always do the consent signing again and give you several copies of those. And then if an interpreter is required, we always document it, that you can't use your sister or any family member as an interpreter. So we always get an interpreter for that. So next, so this is the study journey that I was talking to you about. So we start with the mice here. No, my pointer's not there. So that's what I said about preclinical research. So before it goes into the phase 1, they test it in the lab, see if it actually works. And then if they think that it works, then they write the protocol, and one of the doctors would write it and then design the study, say if it's a phase 1, phase 2, open label, and then they have it peer reviewed by another doctor to see that actually it looks good. that you can't just write the protocol and submit to everything. No, it has to be peer reviewed, and then make sure that all areas are covered. Like they have to have a statistician in place, like a pharmaceutical company who will sponsor, or an alternative company. So it will go through a lot of phases before it gets approved. And then once finally it's approved, then they will pick a site. So all these finance, sampling, regulatory reporting, data collection, it's all part of the here it is. Yeah, here you go. It's back. Yeah.
I have the same problem sometimes.
Yeah.
I lose my.
Yeah.
my
So site selection. So then they pick a site in, like, actually let's pick a site in New Zealand or Australia. And then they will send out like a request. So in Auckland, we don't accept all trials that come to us, and same with Waitemata and all other research facilities. There's a lot of companies that will give you like a protocol, but we screen it as well. So in Auckland every month, we do have our meeting to discuss we call it feasibilities, to check if this trial is actually good. Is there another trial that compares to this? Is this a good trial? So we've got all our hematologists discussing, and us to check that actually we like this trial would be really beneficial for everyone. So we do that. And that's part of site selection as well. Of course, the sponsor would also go to the site to check that we are equipped to run the trial. Like, do they have the staff? Do they have the lab? Can they manage this? So it's all part of their site selection. And then once they've decided that they're select us, then we sort of screen the trial as well, if it's actually okay. And then next is the country approval. So you remember how I said about the pick, like the generic pick, and then once they've had that, then they send it here in New Zealand, and then New Zealand's going to check it. Actually, is this ethical? Is this doable? So then that's why they check it, and they check it with MedSafe as well. Is this medication in MedSafe? So it takes a while as well. And then once they say yes, actually, yeah, it's actually okay. So then it goes here. Document localization. So then it goes to us, to Auckland. So once it's already approved in New Zealand, Auckland's gonna check. Like, we want to make sure that it's inclusive of the Maori population as well. Is it like, because some of the practices, they don't they want to keep the specimen in the tissues. They don't want to save it for research. So we want to make sure that it's localized to make sure that it covers everything. And then make sure that at our site we've adapted to the SOPs and the protocols on our site. So the pick alone has got several stages before we accept it. And then so finally we've actually, yes, this trial is good enough, the pick's okay. Then we do a so-called SIV. So it's a site training visit or site initiation visit. So the sponsor or someone from the company would come to our department and talk about the trial and what it entails before we can offer it to the people, to the patients. So they're going to talk about what it entails, give us an overview, and then once it's done, then we get the green light to conduct the study. So then we recruit people, do all this. It might take 2 years, 3 years, depending on how much data, how many patients they want. And then from here, if everything goes normal, you've been in the trial, then they close the site, because they've gotten enough data, say, because it's global. So like, say, recruit 500 patients in 1 year, and they've recruited everything, you got into the trial. So then they close it out, and then they'll publish the results, which usually takes 3-5 years as well, because they need to collect all this data, because they start collecting the results after the last patient has been enrolled. So like if you're patient number 10, they want 500, they want to wait until the 500 patient has that's why it takes several years. So what happens, so if you're here, everything goes smoothly, you go there. But if you go here in this direction, if you say what I discussed about the initial discussion with your doctor, talking about the trial, and then signing the informed consent, and then we screen you. Screening, you do everything, as scans, heart scan, blood test, and everything. Most of the time, we before the doctors offer you the trial, they want to check that you're actually eligible. We do like a sort of a self-check to make sure that you're eligible. We don't want to give you false hope that, oh, actually there's a trial here, you might get in. So we want to make sure that you've actually got a good chance of getting into the trial, because sometimes trial is the only option available. So we don't want to give you like, oh yeah, here, take it, and then turns out you'll fail. So so we do a screening. So if you unfortunately don't pass, yeah, your journey would stop here. Screen failure. You go back with your hematologist. So you go standard of care. If you do pass, then we randomize you. And then you have your treatment. And once the whole cycle's done, we do an end of treatment visit just to check everything's safe. And then the follow-up, which is what I said could be in the next 3, 4, 5 years. So you're not completely off the hook, even if you say the trial's done. We do a follow-up phone call every now and then. So
when you just keep going and getting your supply of
yes,
medication?
yes. So you don't, yes.
Seeing anyone?
Oh no, you'll be seen every 3 months. Depends on the protocol. So if you go on follow-up, like I've got a patient who's been on it for like 2 or 3 years. So we see them every 6 months.
Oh.
Yeah. And then I actually see them because I need the blood test and swap out some medications. But some people, for instance, like IV chemo, they finish at after 6 months. So we just do phone calls. Yeah, because they don't really need the tablets, but most especially for the tablets, we see them like every now and then. Yeah.
So if a person's on a particular drug that's working really well for
Yeah.
them, like better than what they're on before, are they able to sort of continue on with that, even though it's not sort of out in the market?
Yes,
Yeah.
yes,
Oh,
yes,
that's good.
definitely. We've got a new generation TKI inhibitors. Like imatinib was the first generation, so now we're up to I think the third. The trial has stopped recruiting, but they've opened up an extension just so the patients who are on it can carry on with it. So those are some of the ones that I see every 6 months, and they will be on it until
Gosh,
yeah.
great.
So you don't stop.
No.
Yeah. Which is good.
Yeah.
Which is good
Yeah.
because it's good with the trials, because New
It's
Zealand.
working well, it will
Yeah,
be,
if it's working well, why stop it?
Yeah.
And as much as New Zealand is healthcare is good, we don't have a lot of access to these new medications.
No.
So
Oh, no,
that's why a lot of doctors, hematologists in particular, would push for clinical trials, because say imatinib and I think brentuximab has been recently funded, but we've used that in clinical trials like 2-3 years ago. So
I know that I was told about a drug before I had my transplant that would help. Is it Renuxibid or really hard to pronounce? Funny. Yeah, but I didn't get it because I didn't really get sick enough for it at that time. Yeah. And so they felt I didn't really need it, and then just lucky my sister happened to be a perfect match. Oh. Stem cell. Yeah. So I went to have the transplant fairly soon.
Oh.
But it had, even though it had been funded by Pharmac, it was quite strict criteria about who got it.
Yeah, they're very strict.
Yeah.
So yeah, the more trials we open, the better for everyone it is, because you get more access, particularly multiple myeloma. There's not a lot of options in New Zealand. Australia's quite a few. So that's why we're trying to sort of bridge the gap, but still, there's still a lot of things that would need to be sorted. Yeah, because a lot of people are scared to talk about, like, oh, are you in a trial? Like, you're being played fun, or you're like a dummy. But no, as I've discussed, for us to actually start recruiting, there's a lot of areas that we go through, and especially just coming to Auckland or to any site in New Zealand, it's very strict.
Yeah.
But of course, it comes with the risk as well. Not just There's no guarantee, but at least there's that hope. There's that option.
Well, if you're that bad, you're gonna take it.
Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah.
And there's no point where they say, it's not funded anymore.
No, and that's a good thing. They won't stop. Yeah. Because
Well,
like,
that's the most important thing, isn't it? Really?
yeah,
If it's working, I mean, you should have access to it.
exactly. Yeah, because like, oh yeah, actually, we've cut off.
Costs
Yeah,
$1,000
yeah.
a week.
Yeah, oh, we're paying you like $500 for a petrol voucher a week.
Yeah.
Yeah, we're stopping trial. No, you can't have the drug. No, that's just,
Yeah.
that's very unethical.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, and that's the good thing. And you get the scans as well. More scans. Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Mm.
Yeah. Any questions?
So I would be in phase 1, would I, if I had my build up to the top dose?
You will still be phase 1.
Phase one.
Yeah.
So at what point does it change to phase 2?
Once they've got enough data in phase 1 that this dose is actually the maximum and the safest that we can get, and then they will do a protocol, or probably keep you on the phase 1 and then like change a new protocol, and then probably start recruiting other people for phase 2. But you will not be taken out even if you're in phase 1. You will stay on that dose until they say something. Yeah. So you're not in danger of even if they go phase 2, phase 3, you're not in danger of getting off that drug. Yeah.
So the initial one you do the phase 1, the meetings quite often in the week, 2 weeks?
Yes,
In general.
quite often with phase 1. With phase 1, we don't do a lot of phase 1s because a lot of the times they do overnights. But if it's a particularly good phase 1, I think New Zealand Clinical NZCR does a lot of phase 1s. So there's a lot of research area facilities in Auckland. But in Auckland Hospital, we don't do a lot of phase 1s for hematology because it involves overnight admissions. But because they want to make sure that everything is safe, like all blood tests. But we do have one. It is quite often. You have to visit maybe twice a week. Yeah, just to do some bloods and stay in the hospital for like.
Blood tests, though, do have to be at the hospital, not
Yes,
at the local.
yes. While we are getting that maximum dose, that top dose, we want to make sure, we want to be able to see how you are while taking that drug, because
So you need to wait around until the results
yeah,
come back.
yeah.
If I go to day stay, sure. Monday
yes.
on Friday, have to take the drugs that I've got.
Yeah.
Take it back and then I get new.
Yeah. So usually with phase 1, we've got ramp up periods because we want to start with the lowest dose, and then we ramp it up. Depends on what the protocol says. You can ramp it up every day or every week. And so once we up the dose, usually stay for like several hours or half a whole day in the hospital, because we want to make sure that the safety bloods are being done, and we want to make sure that you're actually okay. We don't see any side effects while you're in the drug. Yeah, until you reach that maximum dose, and then probably your visit would be like every month or every week. And then the longer you are in that, then you can do your bloods at the local laboratory. But the first few weeks, few months, it has to be, we want to be able to see you. We want to make sure that everything's safe. Yeah.
All right.
Done? Stop? Oh.
They put a mirror in you, so
Yeah, normally we would put a lure. We don't want to be poking you every 2 hours. Yeah. Yeah. Not with
No,
No.
I know.
Yeah.
Because I did have a look, for trials for myelofibrosis, not long after I got diagnosed.
Yeah.
Because there didn't seem to be anything for it, no treatments.
How long ago was
But
this?
there wasn't
Yeah.
anything for, and my hematologist at the time was, Eileen Merriman,
Mm,
and she said there wasn't any trials. For
yeah.
that.
Oh yeah, the best source
The
of
rare
clinical
one, I think,
trials,
isn't it?
yeah, is your hematologist. Yeah.
Yeah.
If you want to participate in one, go
Yeah.
talk to your hematologist. And if you want to know the results, because some people, oh yeah, we're curious of the results, also ask your hematologist, because they do publish it in journals, but it's probably a bit too complicated to read.
Yeah.
So your hematologist would be your best bet. Yeah. And yeah, you can always ask them if there are any trials across New Zealand. So I think it was this year actually, they've decided to create like a database to write down all the trials that are happening in New Zealand, which is good because we don't know what other centers are doing. So if we have that, we can do a cross referral to give more options. So yeah.
I have a question.
Yes.
What's the main, just for the viewers online, what's like the main reasoning to get a trial across the line to be used at a specific location? Because when you talked about you have a lot of trials coming in, it's probably like my first question is how many trials do people come and fire at you to try and have at your
so
location?
we've got a team dedicated to sort of looking at those trials and see that we've got enough we've got the capacity to do that. And then I don't know the exact number. There's a specific team doing that, and then during our monthly meeting, they will just talk about those trials. There's quite a few, and then evaluate if it's actually worth doing this trial, or is this trial redundant, or is it good enough? Would it benefit the patients? So what was your second question?
Second question would be like, what's the main thing that you guys will accept the trial within like your site? Because I think one of the things that patients always kind of think about is they kind of think about themselves.
Yeah.
So if it's a rare cancer and there was a trial that came for their rare cancer,
Yeah.
and what about me?
Yeah.
That's what I was thinking.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's always hard.
Yeah, it's hard. See how many people would. Yeah. So we need an adequate number of people as well to treat, because we don't want to be spending all this time and effort and only get one patient every 5 years.
I know.
So that trial would probably close the main sponsor. And then we also need to look at the staffing wise and our capacity to be able to run that trial. And mostly if it's you get enough patient, is it enough patient to be able to enroll to that trial, capacity of the staff, and how good that drug sort of would be. Like, is there any other, why is this drug better than the other drugs? How does this benefit them? Would it just be like same standard of care?
Yeah.
So they're quite stringent into thinking or sorting the trials that are being given to us. Some companies would directly approach the hematologist, and then they'd run it past our team. Yeah.
So do you look at other countries to see if they run trials?
Yes.
To see if it
Yes.
works in there?
Yes. So there's a certain database that has all the trials. I can't remember the website, but it's to check that this trial is actually being, it's legit. But for a sponsor for that trial, they will usually give out a safety data report every now and then they would tell us how many are being recruited on for this trial, and then if they are doing well, they're having a serious adverse event, they would send us a report. So they do update us fairly regularly. Yeah.
One more question for our patients. Is there a place for patients to have a look for clinical trial information, or is that just for like health professionals?
I think you can actually Google it.
Yeah.
But the thing is, you're not there's a website which I can't remember. I'm so sorry. It will have all the list of the clinical trials available worldwide. But you won't be able to tell if it's available in New Zealand.
Okay.
So your best bet would be your hematologist. Yeah.
Cool.
Because they're the ones directly involved with it.
Yeah.
So
Right.
and they also have really strict criteria, which sometimes it would be quite hard for you to compare. But yeah, it is available, but I strongly suggest go to your hematologist. Yeah.
Sweet.
Yeah.
All right. Right, I'd like to thank Sharlyn for coming along.
Thank you.
We're on our recording.